Good evening, my friends, and welcome once again to the Leo and Larry Show. As always, I'm here with my great friend and co-host. I'm Leo Whitberry, and my co-host is none other than,
I'm Larry Smith.
yes, and today's guest is going to talk with us about food. And we know food is very crucial. None of us would be on the planet without it. And you know what food costs are, and you know the quality of food that you eat has a great impact on health and business and communities and so many other things. And so our guest today is Jamie Rye, who is the executive director for Agricultural Missions Incorporated, which is an organization formed back in 1933, and I'm blessed to be working with Jamie as the current board chair. And Jamie, just we want to turn it over to you so you can tell folks about yourself, how you got involved in this work, and about ag missions and other things that you do. Welcome to the Leo and Larry Show.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Nice to meet you, Larry, here too. Um, yeah, so that's a pretty that can be a pretty long story of how I got into it. But I will say uh the old version of it is that I come from a farm family. Originally, my family came out of Tennessee and they were farmers, poor farmers. When the auto industry got going in Detroit, they moved up to Detroit for, at the time, better jobs, and moved from the South. Through a roundabout way, I found myself down in North Carolina. And but somewhere in between there, I decided to become a farmer. After a few generations removed, I started growing my own food on my property. Um, and this is all while being a pastor and working with some immigrant populations and just doing a lot of different things. But I became interested in local food because of the importance that it plays in a community, the importance it plays in culture, the role that it plays in people's health, in education. Food is at the center of every community. So um, it's the work to me is essential work, especially what we all experienced during COVID with food shortages. That's what happens when the food gets spread out across the world, the production. And so we have really focused now on centralizing local food, making sure that the communities we serve and the farmers we work with are producing, healthy, sustainable food for their communities. And right now, with Ag Missions, one of our big goals is to move into supporting farmers to help them develop their local food systems through food hubs and co-ops and CSAs, things like that.
Oh, yes, great. And I neglected to mention that Agricultural Missions is a ecumenical organization. It's a Christian based organization, and we do a whole lot of work with Black farmers, working with Tuskegee University, the HBCUs, and everybody. Why don't you talk a little bit about the grant that Agricultural Missions and Tuskegee University received together to help farmers and in what states this work that you're leading will take place?
Yeah, so Agricultural Missions, just a little backstory. We've done a lot of work overseas, working with farmers, establishing local food systems, currently in Sierra Leone and Liberia, but we haven't done as much work stateside. And so, one of the things that we recognized is that there's a lack of support systems for farmers of color in the South. And so, as an organization, we've taken our years and years of expertise working with farmers and have shifted that expertise stateside. And so through that, we developed partnerships with Tuskegee, And we're a small organization, so Tuskegee has the ability to engage government funds in a way that we wouldn't, in order to create these programs to support farmers. And we have the ability to be nimble, building relationships in communities, building connections and networks. And so the NRCS grant came about through Tuskegee, and they subcontracted us, or sub-award in grant language, to basically go out and do the networking with farmers in different regions, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. We'd love to expand into Florida, maybe up to some work in North Carolina as well, maybe even down into Texas. There's a lot of opportunity to stay in the South and work with farmers. And the farmers are telling us, they've been getting a lot of training, but they don't have a lot of support to help them with local food. And so this grant, we're using that to build all these relationships and networks with farmers, and to be able to hopefully do this work and develop better food systems in local communities.
And so, yeah, because that's very important also, because we had a disproportionate number of Black and brown people who were impacted by COVID. And that was largely because of what we call food deserts and the lack of access for people to fresh produce. And then you also talked about local economies, where we're working with local farmers, especially Black farmers, a lot of whom are struggling. Then we're keeping the money in the community. We're creating businesses in the community and doing different types of training. So that grant was $750,000 to Tuskegee, and a sub-award to agricultural missions of $250,000, or $255,000, which isn't a lot when you're talking about covering all those states, with training, etc.
We're a very agile and nimble staff that works on a shoestring budget, but the work itself is so needed, and farmers are constantly telling us that they really need more support to figure out how to take this wonderful produce or animals that they're raising and get them into market and get them in the hands of people that need it. And so, we've started to network with some great organizations, some I've told you about before, in North Carolina, that have great models that we could copy and use in other communities.
And we have 6 Black farmers that we're working with here in the PD and Horry County region, who really need assistance marketing their produce and even in terms of equipment. And why don't you explain to folks, because a lot of young people don't want to do farming because they see it as so labor intensive, but they have a lot of things now where it's not as labor intensive as it used to be, right?
Yeah, it's farming is tricky, especially for different communities of people where they might have a weird relationship to the land. So in terms of getting into farming, there are technologies now that allow farmers to do the work and have support. We're not just talking about equipment. We're talking about simple things like solar fencers, that rely on the sun, and you can use a poly wire, you can move it, and you can change the grazing patterns of your animals without having to put in permanent infrastructure like they used to. They used to split locust posts and drive them into the ground and create permanent fencing. Well, there's so many options to not have to do that now. So you can move the animals around, raise them on grass, raise them in a healthy way. At one point in time in this nation, farming was a huge part of the economy, right? It was, even on the census, a good portion of families would come up as farmers. now it's less than 1% of people are farmers, and the average age of a farmer, I think at this point, is like 70 plus.
Yes,
So
70 plus.
yeah, so folks are there's been some, I don't know, trepidation of getting into farming. And we'd love to change that. But of course, one of our other partners is the Federation and
Federation of Southern Cooperatives.
of Southern Cooperatives. Yep. And so, land access is a big problem for young farmers coming in. I'm sure you experienced that. Your farmers, either they don't have someone to take over their land, or you have some young farmers that want to farm that don't have land and it's too expensive to buy. So, there's challenges like that that have to be overcome in order to build great local food systems, which is what we need.
But the challenge with that is, if we don't have local farmers, then one, we lose business opportunities. We don't really know the quality of the food that we're getting. We don't know if it's genetically modified. I don't know if you saw this thing, or Larry, if you saw this thing that was on the news this past week, where they're using cells and eggs, embryos, to grow chicken meat. Yeah, I saw it on Good Morning America. And they have permission to start selling it in some restaurant. And so I, for one, am not, and I don't know how many other people feel like experimenting on their bodies and families, eating meat that's produced in a machine, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you also don't know the quality of the food when you have to bring food in from a distance. You have the pollution that comes from trucking it and shipping it over water, which increases the price of it. And then they have to do things to the food so that it's right, or appears to be right, by the time it reaches the stores. But when you know where your food comes from, it's different. I, for one, am not a big fan of eating watermelon until it's July or August, when I know that it's the season for local watermelons. I don't know where those watermelons come from. I don't know if they come from genetically modified seeds or what, And I don't want to wake up one day with a third eye growing out the back of my neck because some commercial is online telling me, if you ate these watermelons, then call 1-800, to some law firm,
Like the fine print on the medicine that they give you, right? It's it may cause the following things.
Absolutely. And so, food is very important. And Larry, as the newspaper person, I know this is something that, when we talk about educating the public and, the idea of accessibility to land. Back in the 1920s, I saw some stats that said back in the 1920s, African Americans owned 60 million acres of land in the South. And it's down now to about 2 million acres, right? And so access to land is, you can have a job and that's good. But when you don't have land that you produce your food, where you can get, minerals from and nutrients, and where you get, materials for making concrete or steel or whatever, you don't really have economic freedom.
Yeah.
You're really beholden to whoever has the land, because land is the source of resources for everything on the planet.
And they're not making any more.
Nope.
That's it is a resource that has a cap to it. But it is the ultimate, thing for freedom. Is if you can control some land so you can control your food, that gives you a lot of autonomy, right? We know that you can support a family of 4 on a 1/4 acre of land if you do it right. And there's agricultural methods that, that would allow you to do that. Square foot gardening, permaculture methods, utilizing hugelkultur.
Now
So there's,
you got to break some of that down now to our listeners.
yeah,
'cause
yeah.
They
Sorry,
don't understand.
you
this
got me
terminology.
excited. That's what happens,
Yeah.
So hugelkultur, right, it's this method that mimics what the forest floor already does. You start with large debris like a fallen tree or large tree branches. Then you layer with a carbon, so leaves, hay. Then you do soil. Then you do large branches. Then you do a carbon. Then you do soil, and you build mounds. And for people who live in cities, for instance, who they don't know what's in their soil, it could be chemicals, they could be near a factory that was spewing out something. Hugelkultur allows you to grow above and create your own soil height that you can grow and know that you're growing healthy produce from without drawing in chemicals that may be in the dirt.
So that can be a small space, an urban space where people don't have to have access to a lot of land.
Yep, and they don't have to worry about what's in their soil because they're creating their own healthy soil on top of it. And all you have to do is go around, the neighborhood and collect fallen tree branches and leaves and grass clippings and and bring in a little bit of soil and you're good to go. And you can grow the entire, height of the mound. And the great thing is it holds moisture really well too. So if you're in a drought-ridden area, hugelkultur allows you to grow stuff and maintain your water levels in a good way.
So what are some of the things you can grow in a mound like that?
I mean, you can grow anything, any of your vining plants, watermelon, squash. You can, if you have a semi-shaded area, you can grow all your lettuces, collards, whatever you would want to grow.
So I could do that in my backyard if I want to. Anyone could do it. Or if you have an apartment complex and your landlord lets you do it, you could do that.
Right, exactly.
About what's the minimum? I know there's no maximum, but what would be a good minimum size space that you could do that in?
Well, the main issue would be width because you're building a mound and you want it to stay. So you could probably do 3 feet wide and go as long as you want to.
Okay.
Yeah. You could go the whole length of your yard if you'd like.
Yeah.
And that's just one method. You can use containers, you can do containers. You can do power growing, where you have different pockets where you can grow lettuces and other leafy greens.
we have 10 towers that we're getting ready to use now.
Okay.
Yeah, where you can do it inside and outside. And there's actually you get a couple of $25 grow lights off of Amazon to mimic the sun and plug it into a wall socket, and it will, as long as you have the tank filled, it will actually water it's a hydroponic, so you're not growing in soil, you're growing in water with some nutrients, and you could grow stuff in a corner in your house.
You're right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. There's so many methods out there that people don't realize. Permaculture is another one that I mentioned. If you look at the forest is always is in layers. You've got your raspberries and blackberries right on the perimeter at one height. You've got your fruit trees and your flowering trees that grow kind of at a medium story, and then you've got your hardwoods that grow to the tall. Permaculture just basically mimics, you grow food in the way that it would grow if it was naturally occurring in nature. So there's all kinds of fun ways to do that. You could just Google it and come up.
I was talking with someone last week. We were talking about some cities actually have what they call food trails, where people can walk. And as you walk, there may be a fence or something where berries are growing, or there's fruit trees, which is great for making sure that children and adults are eating healthier. And also that can provide food for the homeless.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. The other thing is too, depending on how friendly the cities are to it, you can raise a couple chickens. and always have a protein source, eggs. I mean, most people like eggs, and chickens are real simple, real simple to care for.
Well,
So,
I can tell you now that I've had some conversation with cities and the way that the zoning is set up, and I've said this quite a few times, so I apologize to our audience if they keep hearing me say this, but the way zoning takes place in a lot of cities, there's restrictions on growing stuff. There's restrictions on having, like what some cities like Chicago is doing, where they have what they call areas where you can have urban farms.
Yep.
And those cities that have very little commercial zoning tend to be the poorest sections in the city, where people have food deserts, and and you go into a community, North Florence or some more, where you don't have much greenery, and you actually don't have like land along the sidewalk with trees, so you can't plant things, and you would have to get folks to let you do that on their private property, and then they have to worry about people coming on. So a lot of cities have to look at changing the way they're zoning things, because they're actually unconsciously participating in leaving many of their citizens in these food deserts where people are sick, where there's disparities between blacks and whites when it comes to obesity and high blood pressure and diabetes and all of those things. So I love the stuff that you're saying, but we have challenges, and to our audience, I hope you guys hear this, and whoever your elected officials are, talk with them about the fact that if we're going to have healthier communities, and we're going to develop local food businesses, then we're going to have to change some of the zoning in our city. We're going to have to move forward and realize that we can have farming within cities. They all don't have to be in the county. All the farming doesn't all have to be in rural areas, right? Well, how about you talk a little bit about where you were talking about food systems?
Yeah.
I'm really excited about food co-ops.
Yeah.
And I know you work with the Blue Ridge Women in Agriculture. So why don't you talk about some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So where I come from in North Carolina, we have a group. It's an organization that's been around for 20 years. And it started where with a bunch of women, local producers of food, who wanted to figure out how to organize and create a network for distributing food. So they helped organize some in-person farmers markets and things like that. 5 years ago, they started thinking about it and saying, one of the barriers for people is not everyone can show up to a farmer's market on a Saturday. They might be working, especially people who are lower income, who often work in the service industry. They're working.
That's McDonald's. Walmart.
Yeah, exactly. They're working during the time when a farmer's market might be. And so they thought, what if we could do, what Walmart does with groceries, where you order online and then you go and pick up what you ordered. It's something that got really big during COVID.
Can I jump in for a minute?
Yeah.
See, that's another thing with cities and with co-op, with Florence is one example, where if you have a farmer's market, you're actually limited to the hours that you could be open and the days you can be open. And most farmers markets tend to be open on the weekend, right? And so those lower income people in service industry jobs, like you said, they're at work, and they're the people. Some of the people who need access to fresh produce the most. Right. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
I just
you're
wanted
exactly
people
right.
to see that city ordinances, and zoning once again limits people's access to fresh food and even the number of places they could go to get fresh produce.
Yep. I would talk all day about how it would be proactive for them to make changes to allow people to grow their own food and have access to food that they can access. So yeah, so
Online, you talking
back
about
to, online, yeah. So back to the model. Basically the way that it works is there's 106 producers in the area. You're talking about a community no bigger than 19,000 people. So it's
like half the size of a city like Florida.
Right, exactly. And so
this is Boone.
This is Boone. Yep. There's 106 producers currently. I think it's grown since I maybe got that number. But anyway, the producers are producing everything from bread, milk, eggs, butter, lotion, soap, Christmas trees, flowers, vegetables, you name it. You name it. Producers producing everything you can think of.
And everybody's not farming.
Not everyone is farmers.
So you're talking about business, growing businesses.
Right. All different kinds of businesses. Yep. And so you would go online and you would, just like you do with Walmart, you'd look at all the producers, you'd see what they offer, what their prices are, and you go ahead and shop. You shop, you put things in your cart and you put together an order. So then what happens behind the scenes is all the farmers who produce these things that you ordered, they bring it to the food hub to fulfill the order. The food hub organizes your order, and then they have a pickup day. And you go during the pickup time slot, which is basically a full day, and you bring your bags, you text them your name, and they bring out your order to you. You fill your bags and you go home. And the other wonderful thing is now they're serving 4 or 5 counties because they were able to get a donated refrigerated truck. So if you are limited in transportation, they have pickups in other counties all spread around within a 45 minute.
What county? Some of these counties?
Avery County, Ashe County, Watauga County, and I'm still newer there, so I don't know
but all in North Carolina.
Yeah, they're all around Watauga County area.
So if people don't have transportation, that the food can be brought to those pickup spots in different counties.
Right.
Do they do home delivery also?
They don't currently do home delivery. But if you think about the mass amount of spread, because they're going 45 minutes in every direction. But again, they're a nonprofit, that does this. It's a group that organized this. The government, it's a county building. The government rents them that building for extremely cheap. And the county is, behind it. The local government's behind it because they believe that the community needs access to this healthy food. Now, here's one of my favorite parts, if I'm not talking too much. They accept SNAP benefits.
Right.
So they accept the government
SNAP benefits are
the government benefits,
food
assistance. Yeah, food stamps.
I mean, not food stamps. That's telling my age.
Yes.
EBT card.
Yeah,
right?
the EBT. Yep. They accept it. Not only do they accept it, they will match dollar per dollar the government funds. So if you get $30 a month for fresh produce, they will give you 30 on top of that as a nonprofit. So you can spend $60 on all the produce and things that you need.
That includes meats from farmers and
whatever is classified under the EBT program.
Okay.
You can buy from local farmers. Now, this is where the government needs to pay attention, because not only do the federal dollars come in and people are spending it with local producers, but also community dollars are going to those local producers. Families are getting more healthy food. They're supporting local business owners, and those local business owners keep those dollars in the community. Unlike a Walmart or corporation,
the dollars leave the community.
You spend it and it leaves. What they do allows all the dollars to stay right there in the community.
And we for years and years, people have talked about, particularly in Black and brown communities, how many times does a dollar circulate before it leaves a community? And what those experts have said is that in lower wealth Black communities doesn't circulate once.
Nope, it goes
It's
right out usually.
right out. So this
Yeah.
is this is a way for all communities, but particularly communities that need to keep their dollars in there.
Yep.
So that they can repair their homes and they can have businesses and they can actually move um, their community or many residents in the community out of poverty
Mhm.
and to another level. So with all of these things being done in Boone and other places in the country, why don't we see more happening? But what?
Well, if you know, there has to be local groups working together to organize it. And that's always one of the challenges. I think every community has producers. Every community has people who, in the way they produce, they might go to the farmers market, they might run a CSA, community supported agriculture program. But very few communities in the US have a food hub like this. In fact, similar to what's going on in Boone, there's maybe I was told there's maybe one in Alaska and one in Halifax, I think, something like that, in Canada. So it's not a common practice, but what it took was a community saying, we want our people to have healthy food. We want our farmers and producers to make money and grow their businesses, and we want to keep the dollars in the community.
And I can tell you what you're saying is actually very, very true, because I can tell you now that I can get in my car and drive 20 minutes. And in 20 minutes, I can find a farmer who is raising pigs or hogs, chickens, cattle, goats, lamb, sheep, fruits, vegetables within 20 miles of where we are right now. But most people don't know where they are, how to access them or anything. So what we need for that network exists. It's just that the network has not been created.
Right. Yeah, and part of the work that we want to do with Ag Missions is to support communities to create these networks, to say, look, this is good business for everyone in your community. This you're having health issues, part of that is not access, as you said, to good food. And so this helps solve that issue. What happens when people are healthier? It lowers the ER rate. And for folks who don't have insurance, that's government money that comes out. So developing a healthy local food system creates waves of change for a community if everyone is willing to say, hey, let's work together and figure out how we can make this happen.
Plus the food costs less.
It does.
Because now you don't have the additional costs that comes from, and this is so crazy. I think I forgot what state it was, but like New York State with apples, in a lot of states, the main crop that is produced actually is shipped outside of the state.
Yeah.
And I was reading, I think it was almonds, or whatever state it was, they shipped all of their almonds out, and then they bought almonds from from other places and shipped them back into the stores.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense whatsoever. Because it's, when the farmer can take that, when the food can go straight from farm to table, all those middle supplies and delivery trucks and all of those costs are avoided, and now you actually can spend less money for your food.
Yeah.
And we can't control eggs. We went and bought some eggs a couple of days ago, and we were amazed that the price was down to like $1.69, $1.79. a dozen, where just a few weeks ago, it was $4.99 for a dozen eggs. So
Mhm.
the local economy allows you to control the cost more too.
Oh,
Right?
majorly, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it, you know, part of those costs too are with a globalized food system.
Mhm.
People are like, you get a batch of spinach that accidentally got contaminated with some sort of bacteria, listeria or whatever, and they have to throw it all away. They have to get rid of it. So not only did they transport that food using tons of fossil fuel, but now it all has
Adding
to,
to climate change,
yeah,
contributing to climate
but
change.
it was all centralized. So just the fact that a little bit got contaminated, all of it has to be thrown away. But if you have producers and they can, from all in the community, and one of them had a bad batch,
Mhm.
only ones from that producer can be isolated, and you still have all these other people with,
Mhm.
so that's the problem with a globalized system. Is it's a very I always say it's very, unstable. You don't realize it until something like COVID happens, or until there's a
Inefficient.
bad batch of spinach that's making people sick. Then you realize, oh, now all the spinach is gone from all the stores.
Mhm. And the impacts of climate change. So I was actually speaking with some council people, not in Florence, and they were, but in South Carolina. And one of the questions that came up was, how come we're seeing so many farmers growing corn and wheat?
Subsidized.
And it's subsidized. And I explained to them that in parts of the country where they're experiencing droughts, etc., they're not growing enough corn for the cattle. And then also with the water level was down due to a lack of rain on the Mississippi, and it was slowing down the speed that the ships were going down the Mississippi. And so that has impacted the price of soybeans for soybean oil. So they're growing more corn for corn oil.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of folks don't realize that the Ukraine
Yeah.
is one of the largest producers of wheat in the world.
Right.
And with the war going on, there's a wheat shortage, and that's why farmers are growing more wheat right here in South Carolina. So, as you said, things that happen in other parts of the world can actually create food shortages for us, because we're dependent on our food coming from other places.
Yes.
Mhm.
There is incredible opportunity to develop diverse and strong local food systems. Did you know that there's rice that is grown in South Carolina and North Carolina, a local rice that straight comes back to when folks were brought over from Africa
Oh,
on
yeah.
slave ships, that they brought rice in the braids of their hair, and that's, the cornrows background, but
Mhm.
like they brought that here so they could grow this type of rice, and it still exists to this day.
Mhm.
And there's an opportunity for us, to plant this rice, celebrate that heritage, build businesses, and not have to ship it from
Mhm.
overseas. There's all kinds of
Yeah.
things like that.
Which is really crazy, because at the time of the American Revolutionary War, South Carolina was the richest of the 13 colonies, and it was the richest colony because it grew two things: indigo and what they call Carolina gold,
Yep.
the
Carolina.
rice.
Yep.
That was getting shipped to Europe and everywhere. And so why we don't, under these same conditions, grow one of the things that agriculturally made South Carolina the richest colony. Why aren't we doing that same thing
Right.
today?
I know.
Mhm.
There is a lot of opportunity to take back control, essentially financial control of the food system, by producing things that can be produced here,
Mhm.
and can supply the community. So
And let me ask you this, because one of the things I know, that the rice was growing in low-lying areas, because rice likes
Water.
water.
Yep.
They love water and so on. And you saw that with the rice paddies in Vietnam and other places. So I've been thinking about this, and you have more knowledge and expertise than I do on this subject. Since we have so many places now that are flooding more, in like coastal areas and near wetlands and rivers, flooding more because of climate change.
Yeah.
Um, those would seem like to me would be ideal places to grow rice.
Right. And a lot of floodplains can't be used for anything else. Right.
Mhm,
So that's, we would call that, right, climate smart farming.
mhm,
It's saying, listen, things are taking place in the climate,
mhm.
and we're aware of them. And if you ask any farmer that's been at it for a long time, they will tell you that it's not about politics. They will tell you that things are different now than they used to be. And so farmers are having to adapt. So if you're in a drought-ridden area and it's been a pattern, you need to produce crops that in a way that works with a drought-ridden area. And
Or
if you're
drought resistant.
right, drought resistant, or if you're in a region that's flooding now and it didn't used to as much, grow rice. It's a great idea.
So where does our rice come from now? We
Oh,
used to be,
all over.
we
Yeah.
used to be in the early days, we were the major producer in the
Mhm.
Carolinas of rice for the United States of America and over in Europe. So we don't produce most of our rice anymore, do we?
No, we don't. In fact, the Carolina gold almost went extinct.
Mm.
That it's come back. There's one farm, I think, right on the border of South Carolina and North Carolina that's really starting to produce it again. In fact, my wife and I just bought a bag of it through the food hub I was talking about.
Should have brought me a bag.
Oh, I know. I'll get you some
I've
next
never
time.
eaten Carolina gold.
See, and it's not only a good quality, wonderful rice, but it's also the fact that it came from a couple hours, or in this case here where you are, I think it's grown maybe only an hour and a half from here.
Mm.
So, it's as local as you can get for rice, right? So there's and it's funny because as the economy develops locally for people to grow stuff, you get more producers with varying products.
Mhm.
In North Carolina, there's someone that farms water buffalo,
Mhm.
because they can raise them and you can buy different water buffalo products. There's strange mix of things, but
Mhm.
the reality is when the money's there, people will do it.
Oh yeah, there's a woman, I haven't checked on her for a while, but she has cows and she makes butter.
Mm,
And I'm telling you, this butter, you can tell real butter because this butter won't burn.
yeah,
The butter you get out the store, if it's too high, you put it in too long, it'll start to burn.
right.
This butter doesn't burn,
Mm.
and it is sweet and delicious. So there are so many different things. But you were talking about agricultural missions and these other uh, what do I call sustainable food and local grown food organizations and farmers and the like. So you said that you're going to be doing some training. So what kind of training? And South Carolina is on the list.
Yeah.
So I've already told you, we
Yeah.
have a training center in Marion.
Yeah.
We have a church here in Florence. Our doors are open all the time to anyone that we can help in the community, especially helping people to move from surviving to thriving.
Yeah.
And so, what kind of training can you offer? And I can't even remember. I got so many things going on. Have we set some dates for you
We
to
have,
come to South Carolina?
yeah, we haven't finalized the date yet, so we need to
Okay.
do that.
So tell us what kind of training you'll be bringing to the good folks of South Carolina, particularly here in the PD.
Well, I will tell you this, a lot of organizations, they will have their bunch of trainings that they do
Mm,
and they'll bring it in. What we like to do is we like to ask, what are the needs of the
Mm.
community? What are folks saying they'd like to know more about?
Mhm.
And then if we don't have the expertise, we will bring someone in to come do the training through us who has the expertise. So,
So how do we want to do this? We
what,
want to do a survey. We want to do Zoom calls. We want to, because I know you can't come back and forth here.
yeah,
But do we want to do something like some Zoom calls, some conference calls, surveying? Maybe Larry can put something in his newspaper so people have an opportunity to let you know what the needs are, so we can get together and come up with the training and the information that people need.
yeah, for us, the best case scenario is we always try to develop local contacts with folks like yourself,
Mhm.
who have access to farmers who can survey or host an event where they ask questions and figure out what the needs are, but basically would do some sort of needs assessment,
Mhm.
that's how we found, as we're communicating with our farmers, that's how we found this desire for there to be more support around marketing their food and developing local markets,
Mhm.
was from the farmers themselves in each one of the regions talking about it.
Well,
So,
how do we help them too? Because I hear from a lot of farmers. I remember we visited a farmer in around Albany, Georgia. And because after a hurricane, we tend to try to see
right,
what damage was done, what kind of support and help people need. So sometimes we go to areas after there's been a weather-related disaster. And one of the things that we've been hearing, whether there's a hurricane or farmers struggling, is that they also need money for processing sheds
mm,
so that they can, if they have collard greens for restaurants, and some people don't want them unless you can cut them up and bag them.
yeah.
So what are some of the needs that you're seeing with farmers, like that, needing processing sheds? I've had a couple of farmers say, because they're getting up in age, they wish they had the money for a self-driving tractor,
Hmm.
automatic planter, and so what's some of the things you've been hearing? I hope I'm not pushing you in the area where you say, I don't know, we didn't make an assessment on that. I
Well,
know you talk with
I
a lot of folks.
yeah, you really hear uh, a lot of it's regionally based, based on the kinds of issues they've been dealing with client wise. So, or climate wise. So, part of the issue is aging farmers
Mhm.
and not having support or people to come in after them and do it. So that's actually part of it. Is I want to be done farming. I'm too old for this,
Mhm.
but I don't have anyone that'll come in and take over it. So
Mhm.
that's, it's almost like a matchmaking thing, right? Between young farmers who want to farm and people who have land and
Mhm.
are ready to retire.
And we need to educate some young people, because I did an article and Larry was kind enough to publish it in at least one of his papers, the Community Times, and I called it Collected Karma and Trauma.
Hmm,
And so basically what you find a lot of times is that people who um, know about slavery, know about sharecropping, know about the struggles. Like my father was a farmer
mhm.
and he left to go to New York and work because it was so hard for a small farmer. And so a lot of those stories have been repeated, these traumatic experiences.
Mhm.
And so we have young people who have never had their foot on a farm, never picked up a hoe,
Yep.
never planted anything, but because of the collective trauma that has come down through generations,
Mhm.
right? They don't want to farm. They don't even want to do gardens in their backyard, because in their minds it's going back to these
Yep.
horrendous times.
Yeah.
So one of the things that is a challenge, and maybe you can help, how do we move people away from that? And I call it karma, because like karma, that where bad things happen and we just say it comes back on you. It's coming back on society. It's coming back on our communities. And so, do you have any encouraging words or ideas besides what I say? Hey, it's not as labor intensive. You want to grow food in containers and 5-gallon buckets and etc. You can get soil that, and correct me if I'm saying, because I know the soil they grow in, I mean, that they sell in Lowe's and other places, is heat treated. So it doesn't have the seeds for weeds in it.
Yeah,
So if you
it
grow,
also kills the microbes.
it also kills the microbes.
Yeah.
I know you got to add stuff to it,
Yeah.
right? But that makes it less labor intensive.
Yeah.
So do you have anything you can say to younger people who are out there and we want to stop this whole erosion of play on words, this whole erosion of blacks and others owning land and being able to farm on land, but because they think it's so labor intensive, they're selling off the land or the land that they are inheriting. And so what can you say as a young person yourself who used to farm? What can you say where we can encourage people where they not locked into this pseudo traumatic experience that has never occurred to them personally?
Yeah. Yeah. So the interesting thing with farming is it can be done in so many different ways. What it comes down to is this: people like to have some control over their lives. So if in general you're a person that likes to have some control in your life, then it's important that you grow some kind of food. And so just as you think about a motivation, one of the things I mentioned was complex relationships with the land. That's exactly what I meant. These generations of exploitation as it relates to the land. And so there's no desire to go back to the land, and it feels like going backwards. But really, growing your own food is about freedom. It absolutely is, because
Say it again.
growing your own food is about freedom.
Okay.
It is. Absolutely, because you are taking back control of something that you need to survive. So if you're thinking about a motivation, that's one motivation. The other part is, a lot of times when we think about farming, we think about expensive machinery, we think about massive pieces of land. It's unattainable. The reality is, for me, farming started with a couple 5-gallon buckets and some tomato plants. And after I made some of the best salsa of my life from those tomatoes, I realized, hey, this isn't so bad. And there is so many methods out there that create efficient ways to do it in very little space. Hey, if you can get some water, you can get some sunshine, you can grow stuff in a bucket, you can grow stuff in a mound, you can grow stuff by throwing seeds along the fence line. There's so many different ways to do it. And just with a little bit of research, you can tap into a few things. But so I say, get started and then see if you can fall in love with it, And here's the thing, though. Some of your plants are going to die. That's part of the learning process, right? So there's some navigating to learn. But really what it comes down to is, I think there's great opportunities. I think those of us living now through this time of COVID and seeing food shortages in the stores and things like that, I think it is eye-opening that this is something that communities should take back for themselves. They should ensure it is a right for all people to have healthy food.
And it helps cities and counties, because
does.
now you have additional businesses that's been created, which means now you've grown your tax base because they have to pay taxes. And so now cities have more money to provide services et cetera, for their residents. So it's a win-win-win all around for everybody.
Yeah, and maybe it's a conversation for another day, but I just want to say too that churches should be farming together. The average church in the US has substantial amounts of property to produce food for their community, and it just sits there and gets mowed. So that's a whole nother conversation. But what it comes down to is, if you can farm in community, in a network, it makes it easier. You don't have to grow everything, you don't have to raise everything. But if you have a friend who grows the cucumbers and you're the tomato grower, and so raises chickens and produces the eggs, and you say, I got a lot of tomatoes, I got a lot of cucumbers, I got a lot of eggs, let's just swap them around. Imagine what that can do.
That's what people used to do.
Absolutely. This is not a foreign idea at all. During World War II, what did the government do? They wanted people to start gardens in their backyard to take some of the burden off the food system. So the reality is we have the opportunity for that again. And I think young people, coming into it, it can feel a little intimidating because of a lot of the information out there. But like I said, start with a pack of seeds, a 5-gallon bucket, and some dirt in it, and then go from there. And that's the gateway to farming vegetables. And we always say the gateway to raising animals is chickens. So, yeah, there's.
Well, we actually have at our Environmental Justice and Training Center. We have farming family, the Dixon family from Horry County, Black farmers. They've been farming since 1870.
Wow.
So they're going to be doing some training in July and August.
Awesome.
And then also Dr. Florence Anaru from another HBCU, the Stark Black College and University, South Carolina State University, is going to be doing some training in July and August, and then later on in the fall to teach people how to grow food.
Great.
And so, of course, I said you're invited to come in and do training as well, but we're running out of time. And so it's great. We want, we get so many guests like you where we say, oh boy, we have to bring you back, but definitely when we find out the needs here in the PD and we tailor the training to the needs of the folks here, and you come back with others to do the training, we definitely want to have you back on again so people know what you're going to bring to the area, who you're going to bring, and people have an opportunity to sign up for the training so that people can eat healthier, live longer, have a better quality of life, create their own businesses, and move our neighborhoods and communities and families from merely surviving to thriving. So thank you so much, Jamie. Why don't you tell the folks how they can reach you if they want to get in touch and find out more?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the quickest way is through my email. Simple, it's JRYE, like the bread, I always say, like rye bread. So JRye at ag-missions.org. That's the easiest way to find me.
Okay, website?
Yep, it's ag-missions.org.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. And I'm Reverend Leo Whitberry, and as always, we're glad you tuned in to learn more and be able to do more. So if you want to contact me, you can email us at info@newalphacdc.com. Go to our website at newalphacdc.com, or call me at our church where I'm blessed the pastor, Kingdom Living Temple, 843-799-0740. And Larry, if you're still with us, can you tell folks how they can contact you?
You can reach me at the Community Times newspaper at 843-667-1818.
Okay. Well, thank you much, folks. And as always, always, we're so thank you, Jamie, for coming on. And thank you, folks, for supporting us. We hear from you all the time when we're out shopping and events about how much you love the Leo and Larry show. And we're going to continue to do what we can to give you the things you need to know and help you to go to places you want to go. And the way you do that is to listen to the Leo and Larry show. Until next week, this time, God bless. Take care.